Hey there, and welcome to the first week of CRIM 320. I already put out a welcome announcement. This is going to be our actual lecture supplement for the week. I'm going to put one of these out just about every week and go over some material and kind of bring the textbook to life a little bit more than just the words on a page, maybe plug in some of the gaps. So with that being said, I want to make sure that we're on the same page as far as the textbook. So this is the textbook you should be using. Let me make sure my camera doesn't pick up the glare too much. There we go. So this is a textbook we're using, research methods in criminal justice and criminology. And that's what we're talking about. We're talking about research methods. My name is Dr. Stephen Bell, and I will be your professor for this class. And if you have any questions, all my contact information is in the syllabus. Please feel free to reach out. But that's a textbook you should have. The assignments, the assessments, and the material that we're working with, for the most part, will come almost exclusively out of that textbook. And then we'll give these supplemental lectures to just kind of, like I said, bring it to life. But research. Let's talk about that. Let's just start at the very, very beginning, right in the name of the class, the name of the textbook, research. I hear that word thrown around a lot, especially since COVID and a lot of the controversial topics and things like that. I hear folks all the time say, do the research. If you don't know, do the research, do the research. And I don't think, and to coin a phrase somebody else said a long time ago, I don't think that means what you think it means. In those types of situations, there are folks that do what I would say capital R research and then lowercase r research. I think when folks say do the research, they're thinking in their mind, let me Google this and get as much information as I can. And that is a type of research. That is lowercase r research. But in this class, at the university level, researchers like myself, professors, people who do this for a living, criminologists and other social science professionals, when we talk about doing the research, we're talking about finding new knowledge. That's a term that gets thrown around a lot when it comes to actual research. New knowledge. We want to find out things that have never been found out before. We want to find out specific things. We don't want to just be able to Google something for the answer. The things that we're researching aren't Googleable because they've never been researched before. So we have to start out with, what do we want to research? Let's talk about the steps of a research project. And so the very first thing is you have to literally find out what is it that I want to research. I'm a criminologist, so I obviously will research crime-related topics, crime causation, whether it be what affects crime through the offender behavior, through the enforcer behavior, through societal behaviors. What is it that enforces that affects crime? So when I'm thinking of what questions I want answered, I have to think of very specific questions. I don't ask a question like, is crime bad? Well, I don't know. How could you ever research that? How could you ever find data to support whether or not crime is good or crime is bad? It's such a vague term. What I can find out questions to are things like, do weather patterns impact crime rates on university campuses in the Midwest? That is a very specific topic. I can look that up. I can figure out, I can ask that question and think, I bet I could find the answer to that. I could answer that question. Do weather patterns impact crime rates on university campuses in the Midwestern United States? How do we go about doing that? We'd have to pull some crime data. We'd have to pull some weather data, compare those. But also, I don't want to research something that somebody's already researched. Like, how do I know if it's like I've never claimed to be the smartest guy in the world. I literally just thought of that as I was getting ready for this video, that topic. How do I know if that's ever even been asked before? Maybe that question's already been answered and it'd be irrelevant for me redundant for me to try to do more research on that. How do I know if somebody's not already done research to find out if weather patterns impact crime rates at university campuses in the Midwest? Well, I have to review the current literature. Quite literally, the next step. So the first thing we want to do is ask a research question. The next step we want to do is do a literature review. We want to review the existing literature about those topics that we want to ask questions. So I would go to any resources I have to look up existing research studies, actual scientific peer-reviewed research studies have been published, and find out if anybody's asked that question. Find out if it's even a question that still needs to be answered. Because if it's already been answered, I'd be wasting my time to do that. So we do that through, we can go through the KU library. We can also do that through things like Google Scholar. We can look up research, not just Google Scholar, which will bring up all the recent literature, or I mean, not just recent, for the last couple of decades, there's articles in Google Scholar, scientific peer-reviewed articles have been published. And maybe I'll find out that, yeah, that nobody's ever asked that question before. And that's going to be a valid question for me to ask and research. Or I might find out, oof, yeah, like 5 years ago, somebody already researched that and it's already been answered. But then there's something called the gap. The gap is really important in research. The gap is something where if somebody's already researched something very similar to this topic, but they didn't research the other side of it, or they've only researched crime rates as affected by weather patterns in the Midwest, but nobody's checked it in Canada, or nobody's checked it in the Western United States, or nobody has done it in the East Coast or in the South. Well, there's a gap. They only check the Midwest, so let's see if that study can be replicated in the South, or in the East Coast, or on the West Coast, or in Canada, or in Mexico, or in South America. Nobody's checked that. So the two reasons we want to do a literature review, or two other reasons: one, find out if our question's already been answered; find out what other people are saying about that topic. Like maybe they've talked about crime trends on university campuses. I'm gonna see what they've said, but it's not talking about weather patterns. Or they talk about weather patterns affecting crime rates, but not on university campuses, things like that. So we want to find out if it's already been answered and if people are what they're saying about it. And the other thing is there a gap? Is there somewhere I can squeeze in my question to relate to questions that have already been answered? Now that we've got our question and we know what people have already said about it, we got to figure out how it is we're going to study it. I mentioned it real briefly. The methods. In general, we have two very overarching primary types of research. We have qualitative and quantitative research. Qualitative research asks questions of people and their lived experiences, and quantitative research looks at numbers and hard data. So in this case, we could ask people on campus, hey, what is your experience with feeling like a victim when it snows? We could do that. It doesn't really answer our question. Our question was, do weather patterns impact crime rates on university campuses? We would probably ask a different question if we want to do a qualitative. We'd probably say, what are the lived experiences of people on campuses during inclement weather as it relates to crime or victimization? What are your lived experiences? That'd be more of a qualitative. Quantitative is numbers. How many days did it snow and how many burglars were there on campus? How many days did it was it sunny and how many times did people get their doors broken into? Like, those are just very numerically based quantitative ways to answer. And that's, in this case, this hypothetical case, we would probably do our methodology. We do a quantitative research. We probably collect data through secondary sources. We go to the weather data, go to the Weather Channel, go to the some sort of scientific. I said Weather Channel. I meant the Weather Bureau. And we could probably pull some scientific data about the weather patterns, and we go to someplace who houses the crime rates. We would maybe go to Douglas County or go to the university student services, see if they keep records, see if Lawrence Police Department keeps records. Somebody's going to keep records of crime. In your textbook, you talk about the ways we track crime rates, and I'm not going to get too deep into that now, but you talk about the NCVS, the National Crime Victimization Survey, as well as the way the FBI, UCR, the Uniform Crime Reporting, those are two different ways that they collect crime statistics. So with that said, then once we do that, we would go and collect that data. Do exactly what I said. We go to Douglas County or go to Lawrence and go to the Weather Bureau and figure out what data we have. We collect it, gather it, organize it, and the next thing we're going to do is analyze it. We're going to analyze that data and see. We're going to compare days that there was snow, and we're looking at the crime rates there. Days when it was sunny, and what was the crime rate there? Days when it was rainy, what was the crime rate there? Is there a correlation between those two factors? And that's going to be our findings. We'll publish those. We would, in theory, publish those findings. And the other way we would, analyze that data, if it was qualitatively, is that we would look at the interviews or look at the observations we have. So a lot of different ways to analyze data. But those are our steps to research. That's how we get to our findings. That's how we actually do capital R research. All that we just described, you couldn't Google that. You couldn't do the research, as people say colloquially or in society. Just do the research. Well, that was a very lengthy process that we just described in just a few minutes. But doing the research in a capital R situation would take all that. You have to find a research question, figure out the current literature and the literature review. What methodology do you want to use? Collect all the data, then analyze all the data and figure out your findings. We want to make sure that, and even before that, we want to make sure that we're doing this ethically. It's not, no, there's not a lot of folks that are going to be negatively impacted if we're pulling data from the Weather Bureau or from crime statistics from the FBI or from Lawrence Police Department, things like that. But if we were interviewing folks, if we were conducting interviews like that, the other example I used, like what is your lived experience of being a victim in inclement weather on campus? If we were interviewing folks and they gave information that could be harmful to themselves if somebody else found out they were interviewed, or they were to lambast the university for not being safe or something along those lines, they would say, hey, oh no, I want to be anonymous in this. And if you were to reveal their identity, then obviously some harm could come to them, whether reputational harm. I'm not saying the physical harm always, but some reputational harm. Maybe they fear they could get suspended or expelled from the university, things like that. So we have to make sure we're treating people ethically and fairly. And one of the ways that we do that is we have an IRB, an institutional review board. Every bit of research that we do at the university level always gets reviewed at the very, very beginning to make sure that the processes that we're going to use are going to protect the people that are going to be involved. We want to make sure we're doing good by the people and we're doing research for good. So there's a few examples in your textbook, the Tuskegee experiments where some pretty harsh tactics were used and things like that. But even at the lower level, at the undergraduate research level, if you're just asking interview questions, you're just trying to protect somebody's identity, the IRB board, the institutional review board, is going to make sure that you're treating people correctly and your research is doing good and avoiding harm. So that's the very first step to even as you're starting to develop that research question, then you're going to submit all that information to the IRB. KU has an IRB. Every university has an IRB. Every time I conduct research, I have to submit all my plans to IRB, and they look at it and say, okay, that's you know what? If you're going to be interviewing homeless people, and the police are going to introduce you to homeless people, how do we know that they don't feel compelled to talk to you because the police introduced you? If I was looking at like crime rates or victimization among the homeless community. So I have to answer those types of questions, make sure that everybody's going to be treated fairly, everybody's going to be treated ethically. That's just an example that I had a few months ago. So IRB, Institutional Review Board, that's very key to making sure we're doing ethical research and our research is doing good, not just avoiding harm, but actually doing good as well. And then we went over all the steps of the research. If you have any questions, I know this is a little bit of a long video. I don't know if they'll all be this long, but if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. And I look forward to seeing your submissions for the week. Take care.